on off. Oh, it says memory full. Do we have another tape?
Do you need anything else on that? Can you just delete everything?
Somebody has an iPhone, they can
Just delete what's on there, because I've
Okay.
downloaded onto the desktop anything.
Okay, how do I do that? Scene display. Thank you. Okay. Just keeps
You wanna
telling me.
figure
Yes.
We don't really need it so much now, and we can use our cell phones.
Yeah, how do you? Wait. Yes. Good evening. Welcome to the November 16th, 2017 meeting of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll. Director Debbie?
Here.
Director Hasai? Here. Vice President Natoli? Here. Unfortunately, Director Welsh has had an accident and will be unable to attend this evening's meeting. We wish him well and a complete and speedy recovery. We will now take public comment on items for closed session. Seeing as there is none, we will adjourn to closed session and return to open session at 7:30 p.m. Thank you. It is still the November 16th, 2017 meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District Board of Directors. I am President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll again. Director Deppie?
Still here.
Director Hasai? Here. Vice President Natoli?
Here.
Unfortunately, Director Welsh had an accident, is unable to be with us this evening, and we wish him a full and speedy recovery. He's all right, yes. He's recovering at home, and he should be well, and will be delighted to attend our next meeting. So, and unfortunately, because it's too late for public notice, or he could have participated by phone. But so, of course, we all wish him well. So, the board met for closed session, and we gave direction to our labor negotiators. We now will take public comment and for items not appearing on the agenda, and just to remind people, in the interest of organization, we are collecting speaker cards. If you can fill them out and complete them and hand them to staff, that would be appreciated.
They're right here at the end of the staff.
Yep, just for organization. So, Dr. Delk?
A. Stevens Delk. At the last meeting, Jim Watt commented on a statement on the agenda regarding public comment. It's number 5, and it implies this is the time for a member of the public to make a comment about a consent calendar item. But when somebody began to comment about minutes during public comment, she was told to wait until consent calendar. This poorly worded statement first appeared shortly after interim general manager Kevin Hart took over. It was replaced in September, but now the old one is back. I would ask about it, but I know it is board's policy not to answer a question at this time. Also during public comment last month, Katia Deniergard said that Kensington residents are now turned away when trying to dispose of fluorescent bulbs and some other things at the El Cerrito Recycling Center. Because of the no comment policy, President Sheriff Watt suggested it might be addressed by Vice President Natoli during board comment, but it wasn't, which is too bad since the Solid Waste Committee has looked into it and her answer would have taken 30 seconds. A stitch in time saves 9. Now for my 3-minute public comment. The recycling center is a City of El Cerrito facility. Hazardous waste disposal is paid for through membership in Recycle More, a West County Joint Powers Authority formed in 1991. Kensington is not a member. Because of increases in disposal cost of certain hazardous materials, the center will no longer provide free service to non-members. However, it still accepts others without charge, for example, batteries and all sorts of electronics. The district never joined the authority, but entered instead into agreement with the county in 1997. We pay for this service through Bayview as a 3% county franchise fee. Currently, it is $40,000 a year. We don't have to pay a fee at West County HHW Collection Facility, a private company in Richmond, because we also pay for this through Bayview. The amount is currently about $12,000 a year. I am trying to get the district to find out how many residents use the facility. Eileen has been busy. She got an estimate for a single Kensington HHW drop-off event, $70,000. 30% more than the district's annual franchise fee income. She has also talked to Bayview about the possibility of, by appointment or quarterly curbside pickups of hazardous waste, and she has talked to El Cerrito Recycling about options. Until the district can arrange for cost-effective disposal of certain materials, Kensington residents should combine those with neighbors for a once-a-year trip to the collection facility. It is about 10 miles and 20 minutes away by 580 and the Richmond Parkway. Lastly, Kensington residents can still leave used cooking oil at the El Cerrito Center. So recycle that oil from your Thanksgiving deep-fried turkey, and have a good one.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, now we'll take board comments. Any? Go ahead.
And this is not to make anyone feel sorry for me, but last night, about at least 4 mailboxes, possibly more, were broken into on Franciscan Way, the mail stolen. I know I say at least 4 because those are all the locked boxes, or the so-called locking boxes. Probably other mailboxes are broken into as well. So I bring it up also just to let people know that it is a possibility, and to maybe empty your mail, more often than not, because it does seem to be. This is the second time this year has happened to me, so I imagine it's happened to other people as well. But also, I called the post office to complain because I'm going to move the box inside the gate, so it hopefully doesn't happen again. And I signed up for something called informed delivery, and I never heard of it. Maybe someone else has. But they'll scan your mail and send you an email of images of every item they're going to deliver to you, so you know what's supposed to be coming. Because right now I have no idea what was stolen. And I can kind of guess about what typically comes this time of the month. But it seems like a really good service if it works. We'll see. I just signed up today. But it is kind of nice, then you'll know if your mail is missing, it got, misplaced, or someone actually did go in your mailbox and steal it. So it's called Informed Delivery, and you can sign up online. It seems like a pretty useful service.
Okay. I'd like to first thank the KCC for their annual fall parade, and I want to thank our general manager, Tony Constantoros, for so ably representing our district as the Grand Marshal, and I want to thank the KPD for providing traffic control and safety, and their great outreach program on Halloween. We saw them, they were on many streets handing out candy. So the dentists of Kensington may be upset, but the kids were very excited and happy to see them. Just a brief notice, the general manager will mention it a little later in the evening, but we will be having another board meeting on November 29th. This was planned as a finance committee meeting, but will actually occur as a special meeting of the board of directors. Alrighty. One other note, we are going to move, I'm going to request that we move item 9A, which is the presentation by Bob Dice, to occur after item 8A, so which will be the presentation by Glass and Associates. So just note that there'll be a shift in the agenda. So now we move on to the consent calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, staff comments. We're good? All right. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Are there any items that the board or the public would like to remove from the agenda or discuss? If there are none, then I will make a motion that we adopt the minutes, item A and B from the consent calendar.
I second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes 4-0. So now we move on to the first item of old business, Glass and Associates, the presentation by Glass and Associates. And so we welcome, Sylvia, would you like to introduce?
Sure. As we noted in the agenda, Glass Associates came in July to present what was called concepts for the renovation of the community center, focusing on the required seismic, disability access, and energy efficiency upgrades. And per the process, they've spoken with community members, residents at least 3 kind of community events over the last few months, and since they've presented to the board, and also been in contact with the Parks Committee, and now they're coming here to present what's called detailed or design drawings, and not detailed, I should say design drawings, and these are continue to be based upon the work that they've done with their contractors, and they'll explain all this to you in great detail. But thank you for coming and giving them your attention. This is an important project for the community, and one that we are really committed to seeing through in a timely manner. And we know that given what's happened up in Sonoma, we may just be able to skirt in under the edge of increasingly higher prices for materials and contract labor. We will be getting costs from what's called the cost estimator in December. So we have some idea of costs that we've been working off of, but these are just estimates from their contractors. There's a particular part of the contract and a particular person called a cost estimator that will give the board and through Glass Associates more specific guidance around potential costs for the board to begin making some decisions going forward after December or in December. So I welcome Farhat Dowd and Bill Glass to the front. Sure.
Just press the button.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having us. And as Sylvia mentioned, last time we were here in July, we were in the schematic design phase. And back then, we had met with several users of the building. We had met with Parks and the board, and we had presented basically the initial findings of what this project entailed and solutions that we felt were appropriate to address those issues. So now we are here to tell you what's going on in the design development phase, which, as Sylvia also mentioned, is basically delving a little further into the project, looking at how things are actually going to be working, talking more with the committee members and the community to actually, see what people's preferences, how they lie, and a little bit more how all this stuff would work. We've also been working closely with our consultants, the structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, to basically just, see how these things would work. So I'm going to just reiterate what this project entailed. Basically, the impetus for the project is to make the building seismically sound, according to the report that was done by Gregory Paul Wallace. There are a few structural failings, if you will, that the building does not comply with right now, and primarily those have to do with the roof not being secured to the walls properly. And so there's the structural aspects, there's the that actually triggers the ADA, because the cost of the project, if it's over a certain amount, you have to then bring your building up to the ADA standards. So that involves several things, which I'll reiterate as we get a little further on. And then the energy improvements are also triggered as a result of that. So that is basically the what we've defined as the minimum scope. Without that, there really isn't a project. You do have to comply with all of those things. And then, as we had our meetings with different users and different committee members and the community, there are many other requests and needs that we found. And so we've tried to address options on that and tried to see where those two things would converge, so you get a little bit more, bang for your buck. So we're going to start with looking at the site improvements, and primarily, they are, it is the ADA work. If you see basically by code, we're, we have to put in one space that is ADA compliant, and then this loading unloading zone. And so this is, how we've looked at it. It does sacrifice one or two spaces that you have out there, but basically you have to do this to comply. So the green shading, the teal color, is denoting what's called the path of travel. So it's if a person who, qualified is for the ADA accessibility were to roll up into this spot, they should be able to get from their car to the entrances of the building, and actually it has to be all the exterior doors in this case, have to be at 2% grade. And so that's what we're showing here with this teal color. This extra shading here is probably the area that will need to be worked as well to provide, basically to feather it out. You can't have a big bump or whatever, but to basically to reach the grade that you need here, you may have to actually work a much larger area of the site. The other thing I just want to mention for ADA is that we are denoting this area here, these doors here, as our primary entrance, and then our second exit door would be the one here that is just off of that hallway in the back by the restrooms. So these ones would have the automatic closers and the panic hardware, and those would be the primary exit doors. Okay, I think we can go one more slide. For the structural aspect, again, the primary failings of this building are at this large roof here, and it's not doing a few things. First of all, it's not tied adequately to the walls. So if there was, some sort of, earthquake or even huge gust of wind or something, the roof could just fly off. Our structural is recommending that we tie the roof basically, at all edges. And on these walls, there would be ties, and at these walls, there would be ties at the trusses. So you would go through the trusses into the roof. And also at these walls here, the roof additionally needs to have some tying. These walls, now shear capacity, they actually are sound. The roof, however, is not does not show adequate shear capacity, so the remedy for that is to put on another layer of plywood, and for that we would take the roofing membrane off, and we're looking at it as an opportunity to at the same time put in some insulation, which is what you're going to need for the energy requirement. We will not be touching this 2-by decking that you see here that's running diagonally and is, directly affixed onto these truss joists. We will not be touching that. So everything will happen from the kind of the top down. We'll be putting in insulation and then that other layer of plywood and then the roofing material on top of that. And then, let's see, so this wall is, the problem with this wall here is that it is an unrestrained cantilever. And what that means is that it does not, it basically, a couple of things. It doesn't, first of all, it won't support itself. And the other thing is it does not support the roof. It's not tied in any way to the roof. So again, the roof, there isn't an adequate capacity here for the roof to stay up. It would possibly, just topple down. So a couple things that our structural has recommended, and I'm going to go forward and get to that, which I think maybe the next slide, yeah. So here you have our building from the exterior. This is what it looks like right now. And I'm just going to point out that you have glazing all the way here, which basically eliminates this concrete block wall area from having direct ties to the roof. There are these little columns here, but they don't go all the way through because they're wood. This is the concrete block. So you don't have any sort of way to basically restrain this wall at this edge. It's tied at the foundation, but it can go this way or that way. So in terms of the minimum scope, our structural engineer is recommending that in order to stabilize this wall, because it can't support itself and it needs to be tied to the roof, you would have a series of columns that would be probably tube steel, but some sort of steel. They would each have a new footing, and then they would be tied through the block wall. Here's a view of it on the inside. And then they would also go all the way up and tie at the roof. So that's kind of the minimum scope of the structural. Here are the interior ADA revisions. So the bathrooms, the good news is there really isn't a lot to do at the bathrooms. They are in pretty good shape for the clearances that you need. And the type of fixtures that we have. We are looking to upgrade the fixtures, but the only kind of plumbing changes that we need to do are really just this fixture here needs to move out a little bit, and it can be easily accommodated with the space that you have, that we have currently. And we would just be kind of reorganizing the partitions. The kitchen, on the other hand, to make it ADA compliant, the workspaces, the counters, right now they are not at the correct height, which need to be 34 or 32 inches high. So we are going to have to provide, basically at every use that you have in the kitchen, you must make it accessible. So we're proposing that all of the counters and then all of the cabinets are removed. The appliances stay where they are, and the utilities, stay where they are. You will have to put in a new sink to, once you lower that counter height. And the flooring we're also going to remove because it looks like it's pretty worn. This door does not have enough clearance around it, so we're going to remove that counter. So here's another view of it, and this table here is basically a rollout, a movable table, which can slide and, be kind of slide under the cabinet, under the counter here, and then be taken out. And this is a response to the cooking teacher, Vicky's, after having some discussions with her regarding how she operates her cooking classes, and I know this too because I also had several of the same problems. The counters are just too high for kids, and since they're such a large part of the users, we really wanted to make sure there was some accommodation for them. So we thought this was a pretty clever idea that Vicky had. And then it also operates as additional workspace for ADA should there be any, need for that. Let's see what else. I think that pretty much covers it for kitchen. For energy compliance, I did mention that the roof, we're going to take the opportunity to, when we have to put in new shear for the roof, to put in insulation. This is probably the only roof in the building that does not have insulation, and the walls, of course, don't. When the 1988 remodel was done, they did provide insulation in the newer roofs and the walls. So this would be adding a lot to, get get the heat to stay into the building. We're also going to be upgrading the clear story windows so that they are double pane and low E. And one thing we did look at is that the clear story windows, although they do have this ability to open up, it's really not well regulated. And so even though the building could have its own passive cooling, there's really, unless you want to go through the expense of having some sort of automated system, we thought that it would be better to actually put in some glazing here. And I can go into that more as we found there was an opportunity to do that. I just want to make a comment before we leave this slide that this note here, this drawing was done since we've gotten some new information about the heating units. We found that actually, for energy-wise, the current heating system does actually meet the energy modeling of the building. It does provide adequate heat for the needs of the building. I know that's not good news for a lot of people, but so we have actually decided, since we're really hoping that to present the absolute minimum scope of the project, we've actually taken the need to replace these heaters and moved them into the optional category, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But so,
Yep.
Do you want to say something?
Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. I can hear myself. The energy survey that we had done for the building by our energy consultant, which is a separate consultant from the electrical, mechanical, and plumbing consultants, showed that the building actually performs quite well energy-wise. There are a few things that we need to do. There are different ways to get to energy compliance. One of them is the limited amount of roof insulation that'll be added, which Farhad already mentioned. And we're still looking into lighting. Lighting may or may not be required in terms of energy. There's other code issues. Once you touch any lighting in a particular space, you're obligated to replace the lighting with lighting that complies with energy with Title 24. So that's still up in the air a little bit.
Yes, I was going to mention that it's a little confusing, but there is for a project, you have to pay attention to the energy requirements, and what we talk about when we say that is, and those are separate from building code requirements. So it's a little confusing, but energy, the way our consultant has modeled the building is looked at it on a performance basis versus a prescriptive. Performance looks at the entire building in how it performs collectively. Prescriptive approach looks at each individual thing. So it would be your heating, your exterior and interior lighting, and your windows and your installation. So sometimes it's easier to get compliance if you look at the entire building's performance, because where one thing is failing, something else makes up for it. And he has done it that way to basically give us many options rather than to force us into a corner to have to upgrade or change something. And we felt that was the better approach, given that there's a very tight budget for this project. I also want to mention, Bill actually touched on this about the lighting. So there is the energy aspect of the lighting, and then there's also the building code, but there's also, it does fall under accessibility requirements. And so there are things that would have to be changed to comply with accessibility for lighting, and then of course for energy, which would be things like occupancy sensors and dimmers and that kind of thing. So here is the minimum project scope, rough order of magnitude cost summary. And this cost summary has been derived, by us, the architects, as well as working with our consultants, using, the experience that we have in the industry. And these numbers, of course, are based on what we know currently of the project. So you've seen kind of the scope and the level that we've gotten into it. You'll be getting, as Sylvia mentioned, we'll be getting much better, more accurate numbers by the professional cost estimator, and those will be based on more detailed drawings as we get into the construction documents. So I just want to go through a couple of things. I mean, it's basically representing the things that I just went through. The site work, all the ADA upgrades are kind of pulled out here, and then the electrical thing. There will be some finish work that has to, happen after all the stuff is torn out. There's always things to kind of touch up. So this is our total that we're looking at right now. Okay, and so now I want to go into the requested improvements, and these were items that we found in meeting with the different groups, the user groups, the community groups, the different committee members. And so I think we can actually go to the next screen. With site work, we found that so many members of the community were really asking for more accessibility spots, because there is a high level of seniors in the community. And they wanted to know, what that would look like, how that would work. So this is our response of trying to get in 2 spaces here. Basically, adding another space, you would be carving into the hill right here. It's pretty tough, this corner right here, because there's several things going on grade-wise. There's a lot of dramatic grade changes here. There's also a sewer drainage, just a water catchment right there. So there's a light post. So there's several things going on, but this is how we're showing, trying to get another spot in there. For the structural options, we found that this wall right here, it actually is ending up costing a little bit more to keep it, and it's much more efficient if you actually tear out what's there and put in steel moment frame, which is much more efficient also structurally. And, once you do that, once you decide that, you don't really need this wall, you don't need to keep what's there, and it's actually more laborious to try to keep it, it frees up a lot of options in terms of what we heard from the community over and over again, that the way they use this building, they would really like to meld the use outside and the use inside. A lot of groups like the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the Fly Fishers, the camp, the summer camp that's here at KCC, they really wanted to have at the very least visual access to the outside, because these clear story windows, they are lovely, but they don't let you, give you that connection of what's happening outside. And so we have presented several options of what it could look like if you were to put in a steel moment frame and put in glass. So this option here with the French doors seems to really fit the need the best, we are thinking, in that you would have the visibility as well as the physical ability with doors opening up to go in and out. And I want to also take a minute here to just point out a couple things. Here is the entrance to the building, which would be a double door, and this would be your secondary entrance, and these would be kind of the main doors to the building. And if you're going to put glazing here, this much glazing, you're also going to need some sort of awning or canopy system. And so our response was to kind of push that a little further so that you are also announcing an entrance here, so that when you're parking out here and coming to the building, you a lot of people said that you don't kind of know where to go. A lot of people want to go to the side here because they see those doors and windows there. So this is our response to kind of lure people into this area here. And then also, if you're going to have this openness here, it actually kind of pulls in this space, and you can use it as kind of an extension of the inside. For many of the events, I know things happen out here, and the Fly Fishers is one example. They set up tables out here, and then they teach people how to cast into the lawn. And then many of the fundraising events, I know that KCC has, there's a lot of opportunity to set up tables here, and you have events going on outside. And so this seems to be the best response to gain both, the visual connection as well as the physical connection. And here you can see it from the inside, what it can look like. The other thing is that, some people were concerned that if you do make all this glazing here, what about privacy? What about the solar control, the light control? So we're putting in an option to have shades, along both the clear stories as well as as this area down here. And those can be, if people feel there's just too much light, if they're having a meeting or something in here, then you have that option. You also have the option if you want privacy, if there's a group in here and, it's like the aerobics class or whatever, and they don't want people staring at them, you can close it up and put the shades down. So there's flexibility that we are hoping, to respond with that. Here's another option, which is the pivot and slide system, which we've been referring to as the Nano Wall system, because that is a brand name of these type of doors that you can get where they, pivot and then you slide them all the way out of the way so that you have a really open space. And here's what it looks like on the outside, and here's what it is on the inside. And then this is another option where you would just have fixed glass all the way in here. And here it is on the inside. And again, some people were concerned that you would lose the seating area that you have now. There's so many chairs that are along that wall, and again, if you close up the doors, put the shades down, you can put anything up against there. But I think also, people tend to use the space that they have, and the space that they're given. So if you reorganize the space a little bit, I think people will just adapt to it, and you'll find other ways. We're also, I think you can probably go to the next slide. Oh, okay, no, that's okay. I'll address it when we get there. So I'm going to talk about the options for the energy, which basically the heating. We've looked at a few options of how the heating in this building can be changed. I mean, one thing to note, okay, so we did say that these gas unit heaters, although they are loud, ugly, whatever people think, they do work for the kind of the low use and needs of this building. They are, though, keep in mind that they are 30 years old. They are not very efficient in terms of providing heat, fine, but the actual energy usage, it is outdated technology. But nonetheless, it would be a much easier thing to do to replace these, much more cost-effective thing. So that's one option. Another option that we've looked into is to put in furnaces. So there would be one for this main hall. You'd have a ducting system. You'd have a furnace somewhere in this corner here in the storage area, and you'd run ducting and a soffit in this hall, and then you'd have a furnace for the 3 meeting rooms on the other side, and run ducting for those to heat those spaces. So that's a second option. And then the third option is what we're calling the hybrid system, which would be to put in the furnace and ducting in this main hall so that it is a little bit more sightly. You can, hide it. It's a little cleaner appearance. But then perhaps you're saving some money because you're just upgrading the gas heaters in the other 3 rooms there. Here are some options for the storage area and a couple other things. So, we got a lot of comments that there was not adequate storage in this building, and that what is there in terms of that room, it's perhaps not as secure. So we wanted to do a couple things. We also got responses that the building is very utilitarian. It would be great if we could have some sort of centralized projection, AV, sound thing, so when people come and do their presentations, they could just kind of plug in and it's ready to go instead of hauling their own speaker system and all of their, paraphernalia for that. And then, probably the overwhelming thing we got is that there aren't enough outlets, and Wi-Fi would be great, which, of course, the world has changed quite a bit in the last decade. So we are doing several things by adding this storage at this wall. First of all, the very obvious thing is to add more cabinets. And then we thought we can get some extra seating in here with the benches. The kids who use this on a daily basis, they definitely do whatever the various activities. There's always kids kind of hanging out at the sides, and their stuff is kind of strewn. I mean, we can't guarantee that their stuff is not going to still be strewn on the floor, but this at least gives them kind of a landing spot. And then also you have some cabinetry here to kind of warm up the space and hide the power and data that would be here. And also, we could make this central area here kind of a proscenium and the focal point on which you could hide your projection screen, your automatic projection screen, and then have your sound system, your AV stuff kind of all within the cabinetry here, and it could be basically controlled as to who uses it by being locked. Another thing we did get some concerns about, so that here's another option that basically shows the storage going all the way up to the roof to just provide more storage. And another couple of different opinions we got on this fireplace. Some people love it, want to keep it, want to turn it into a focal feature. Some people don't at all. They just want it, and like, nobody uses it, let's just get rid of it. So one of the, for the previous slide that you saw, can you just go back one? Yeah, so this solution here basically keeps the fireplace. You're not destroying it or removing it, but you are covering it up with some cabinetry, and then you have the option to go back at any time later if people all of a sudden decide, hey, you know what, we're going to make this into a rental facility, or we're going to do this or that, and we want to bring that fireplace back. It's there, and it can be converted to gas and turned into something better, which is one scenario here that we've shown. Okay, and then these slides here respond to comments we got that the building, first of all, it's very awkward when these meeting rooms are being used and you come out and there's something happening in this large space that you're on display. You want to go to the bathroom. There really isn't a discreet way to get there. And then some other comments about, if you come in through the main entrance, kind of the same thing. You don't have kind of a sheltered spot to land. You are just in whatever activity is happening here, and everybody's just kind of looking at you. So we came up with this screen wall idea. Instead of having, a permanent fixed wall, there could be a screen wall that it could be permanent, but we have had a lot of concerns about people saying that we don't want the space to be encroached upon because sometimes there are meetings or events, and we really do need the entire space. So this screen wall could then be a movable system. You could perhaps do a pivot and slide thing where it would just completely collapse and move to the opposite walls, and it would provide much more flexibility depending on the use. And then, just go back one more. This cabinet here and bulletin board is also in response to a couple of comments about again, this notion of having a place to land when you first come in. And, there could be flyers and things for meetings here. People could set up their coffee here. This would be, a bulletin board that you already have now, but kind of more in a more prominent spot. Okay, next one. This is, again, the cost summary, and here on the left, we're showing the minimum scope, which the slide we saw earlier, and then this illustrates the options that I just ran through. And, a couple things that I just want to call out is the option to add that additional ADA parking space, the second one. And then these are the various options for the southwest wall, where we would put in a moment frame, and then you could, have either the French door option, the fixed windows, or the pivot and slide nano wall system. And then these three illustrate or show the different options for the heating system, which would be the replacing the gas unit heaters, doing a furnace with ducting, and then the hybrid, where you did the furnace ducting in the main room and kept, or replaced rather, the gas unit heaters in the three meeting spaces. These, go through the other kind of more minor options. And I just want to make a note to these colors of the squares here, these ones that are orange that are more opaque. These would be items that you would want to make a decision on pretty much as part of this renovation. They're invasive enough that if you were to try to do them later, you would be probably paying a much greater cost because every time you get a contractor out here to do some work, you're paying that profit, and the setup charge, for all of that. So these are things we're recommending that you make the decision for basically when you award the bid. And then these are things that you can probably come back later and add, and it would not be, be very minimal intrusiveness for the building, and the cost would not, it will not add a huge cost if you were to defer them to do later. That's pretty much where we're at now. 1 second. We're going to be heading into the construction document phase, which will be really getting into, details. And I just want to reiterate that the way we're structuring those is to have the set, which is the base bid, the minimum scope that we're outlining, those three things, including the fire, life safety things. And then we would have these bid alternates, which would refer to the optional items, so that we would be getting a little more accurate numbers from our cost estimator, and we would be working towards the final set that we would give when we give the project out for bid. So I think that's it. Do you want to add something, Bill? Or okay. Do you want to?
Questions in just a moment
Oh,
from folks. If you
okay.
And allow public, excuse me. So if the board wants to return, we'll allow for public comment in just a moment. First, I want to thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. This is not, I just want to let everybody know, this is not your only chance to comment. We, of course, are happy to receive your emails and your thoughts in future, so if you mull this over. The cost summary sheet that you saw previously, it was not meant to be an eye test. I know. Well, I think Mr. Nagel had the right idea, took a photograph, and we could blow it up on our phones. The reason we didn't include that cost estimate in your packet was because we are receiving cost estimates in a couple of weeks, and we thought having figures that will possibly be moot out for everyone could be really confusing. It was not meant to, deter anyone or keep information from you. So,
I was going to say, in fact, the numbers changed even like in 24 hours, frankly. And I think we can put this, the designs on, maybe try to get it up on our website. I don't know if we can do that, but we'll try to put this up on the website.
Excuse me.
any further comment, or yes, if you have questions, please come up, please come up so that they can be recorded for posterity. And then it is, yes. Well, we try.
Questions, will we be able to get copies of all of these in order for us as members of the community to be able to integrate a great deal of information that cannot really be, I think, adequately integrated in this format?
We'll make it available on the website, Leonard?
It'll be available on the website?
Yeah,
the
and
whole thing?
as soon as we can make
Great.
it available.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then another question, have the insulation values of having all glass, whether it be doors or windows, have those insulation values been calculated and the consequences upon the heating and the costs of that been calculated? I don't, maybe I missed it, but maybe it's not there. And secondly, there were 3 options for heating, but I didn't notice a 4th option, which seems worthy of consideration. That's solar.
The energy consultant and our engineers, our energy consultant and our engineering consultants include in their work the calculations that have to demonstrate conformance with Title 24. If we increase the amount of glazing over here without a canopy or an awning of some kind, you'll be getting a lot of solar heat gain, but you would probably, which we can control to a degree and which we can use in a passive way, but you will also probably have
roughly the same performance from properly insulated and installed glazing that you get from an uninsulated block wall and the clear stories. So from the energy envelope, there's not a tremendous difference. But all of that goes into the calculations that allow us to meet the Title 24 energy performance standards.
My concern is really how much it costs us, how much the energy expenditure costs us. So that's what my concern is. And I also was asking about not so.
Yeah.
Go back to the microphone. Okay. Thank you. Oh, press the button. Okay. I'll go here. My question also entailed actually putting in solar panels of some sort or another in order to use solar energy, because the passive solar energy you get from just when the sun is shining and having it come in through the windows is, I think, a relatively small factor in the overall energy expenditure.
To meet Title 24, buildings now have to be solar, to meet Title 24, buildings now have to be solar ready. So when we get through with the project, the building will be solar ready. We've not included the cost of solar panels, solar collectors in our project at this point. They're not needed to meet the energy code. There's certainly reasons to put them in. They would have to be put in a way that allows each panel to individually have its own thermocouple, so that you don't get a problem of shadow falling on one panel and taking down the efficiency of the entire array. But that's a technical issue. Yeah.
Is that a reason?
No, that's not a reason not to do it. The reason not to do it is the first cost. And amortizing the first cost is something that the board might want to consider. There are certainly advantages, and there are sustainability issues around the solar panel and so forth.
Will that analysis be included in what's provided to the board?
We can do that, yes, we can certainly do that. But at this point, we're bumping up against, just to get the basic part of the project done, we're bumping up against our budget limitation. We're over what the intended budget was. So to add solar panels is an additional first cost. If the board wishes to go that way, there's certainly good reasons to do it.
Might be an alternative to some other thing.
Yeah, we can provide that information, yeah.
All right, I think Ann Forrest and Todd Hodson from the KCC are going to speak for a moment. We want to thank, the KCC board has been working with Sylvia, Director Hasai, and the Park Committee on this project.
Todd Hodson, I actually had a question before we make our presentation on your presentation. The first option for this south wall, which we call it the west wall, was doing basically piers, the holding down. That wasn't, the columns, I don't believe you showed that. So that's still the least expensive option at this point, because it's $70,000 or so more to add the opening walls, right? I was just unclear about that.
I think we did have that the other night when we presented to your group, but the structural aspect of it is less expensive. It becomes more expensive when you add the glazing and the doors. And so those numbers are what are represented in the cost sheets.
No, I thought that actually it's going to cost more to try to preserve this wall. Structurally. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, sorry.
That was what was confusing me. All right, so Ann Forrest is the president of the KCC, and I'm the vice president. And we're here representing the Kensington Community Council. Just so most people know what we do, but we're an organization in the community responsible for the recreational arm for Kensington. And among other things, the KCC runs the Kensington After School Education Program and the 10 Weeks of Summer KCC Camp. And because of the we're one of the major users of the community center for the children's programs, we have a great interest in seeing the renovation of the community center be completed in a timely manner. And we've been anticipating this renovation for many years, and in fact, contracted with a local architect in 2009 to create some original drawings that got this conversation started. And during that time, we've been saving and fundraising from the community to help with just such a project. And I want to commend Glass and Associates for doing a great job of conceptualizing this for the community. So we made a motion, and it was passed by the board, and we wanted to do this on a timely fashion so that you guys would have the benefit of knowing what KCC was willing and able to do to support this project. Therefore, it gives us great pleasure to announce that the KCC board would like to offer $250,000 of unrestricted funds towards the renovation of the community center. So that would be just towards the basic project, whatever ends up being contracted for. In addition, included in this amount is our matching gift funds of $32,540, which we've been matching with our annual fund drive. So that total amount is the monies that have been donated plus our matching part. So that's part of the $250,000. Additionally, and this is the exciting part, we would like to purchase or buy several of the options should the board decide to proceed forward with adding those options based on community input for up to $210,000 additional for the following items that we've talked about. We had the benefit of having two presentations prior to this meeting, me on the building committee and through KCC. So we've had some time to look at these numbers and the various things and talk about how what our priorities for KCC would be. These items would be completely funding the upgrade to the nano wall from the current project, so that I believe is, I'm not going to name any numbers. The full upgrade of the heating system, including ducting for those rooms and this room. And the storage wall, not including the fireplace. Should you guys want to do the fireplace, it's fine. And the acoustical ceiling. So we felt very strongly that this acoustical ceiling is not attractive, it's falling down, it's, we can do a lot better in terms of acoustics, and so we also thought about doing the floor, but we figured the floor can be done later. So that's sort of what we're working on, and we have any offer of financial support from KCC is predicated upon the renovation project becoming fully funded and a contract for completion signed. And we've always been a major fundraising entity in the community, including the funding of the renovation of the recreation building, the public toilets in the park, and the original renovation of this community center. And we look forward to joining the KPPCSD in their fundraising efforts in the next year to see that this project becomes a reality. And we anticipate that other K groups and other Kensingtonians will join us in that effort. Thank you.
I can't say thank you soon enough.
Check. But
A more complete copy to the board of exactly that.
thank you. We'll pass that. And let me say, I will speak on behalf of the board. I'm not usually permitted to do that, but I'm going to take that honor, that we are honored and delighted to be your partner, and we are so very grateful for your gift and thank you. I'm a little speechless, so thank you so very much. We do too. We look forward to working with you, so thank you again. Lisa, please come forward. Yes.
Hello, Lisa Corona from the Kensington Improvement Club and resident of Kensington. Well, that's a hard act to follow in terms of donations to this worthy project, but I did just want to reiterate that the Kensington Improvement Club has earmarked, well, actually had $15,000 earmarked for this building, of which $5,000 went to this sound system. So we now have $10,000 in our budget that we have in reserve to contribute to this project, and we're very happy to see this move forward. We're very excited about it. It's been long overdue, and it'll be great when it happens. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, we thank you very much. The Kensington Improvement Club came forward readily to contribute to the sound system, which is so much better than it was, we all know. So we thank them, and no gift, thank you. That $10,000 is $15,000 total is not a small gesture. So thank you all to your entire board. Any other, no, not donations, comments. It's comments. No. All right. If none are for this evening, we thank Ms. Dowd and Mr. Glass, and we look forward to working with you again. So please send us, your thoughts and comments and questions as they occur to you. So,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, now we're. Yes, I think, Bob, do you need a minute to set up, or are you, okay. We will probably take a 2-minute break here to let them break down, and just, I'll make my comment before we start. Okay, we'll come back again in just a minute or two. We'll get started again. All right. We're going to begin again. So I just want to let everybody know before our general manager introduces our next speaker that December 14th is our last meeting of the year. And we want to make sure that you all are attending because we'll be honoring our community members who have supported and served the district this past year. So we want to celebrate all of you. So please, that'll be December 14th at 7:30, just in case any of you need to make an earlier exit rather than later. So our general manager, Tony Constantoros, is going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you. I didn't want to stop any further donations, however. I didn't want to interrupt the process. We seem to be on a roll there for a while. Well, I've been the general manager here for approximately 5 months, and I've noticed, thank you, I've noticed some improvements that can be made in the administrative organization. And that's probably to the public one of the most invisible parts of the district, because it's not something you see every day, not something you encounter all the time, but it is the foundation with which all the services are accomplished. And a good foundation means goals are accomplished, things get done efficiently. When you don't have that foundation, then they tend to work inefficiently. And I noticed that there were opportunities to improve the efficiency of the organization. I saw that there were also duties that were either not assigned or not done. And I'll give you a quick example of that is the personnel function. The district really does not have a personnel function. So what happens is that attorneys are called in frequently, either after the fact or during a complaint process, and that's a very ineffective and costly way of managing personnel. I also noticed that there was no real sense of best practices and how to implement best practices, and that priorities were not clear and weren't being accomplished. I also saw that there weren't policies in a number of areas, and that's a longer-term issue about how do you accomplish these policies. How do you write these policies? How do you identify the areas where you need policies and then go ahead and complete the policies? And that there's limited redundancy, so there isn't a backup to every position. There isn't a clear process on how everything functions interactively. I thought the best way to proceed was to do a quick overview of the administrative organization, and I called on the public management group through Mr. Dice to conduct that general overview. Now, this overview does not include a cost analysis. It's just an analysis of a third-party analysis of the organization and how it can be improved. In a cost analysis, there's going to be probably some additional costs and also some cost savings, and that would be a future phase of this type of analysis. But the goal really is to create this foundation so things are done well, efficiently, and cost-effectively. So with that brief intro, I wanted to introduce Mr. Dice, who did conduct this analysis.
Thank you. Normally, I'm smarter than I am today. Normally, I would bring my own projector and be ready, and whenever I give presentations, I only let the viewers see one line at a time, so they're stuck listening to me, and they don't read ahead. Well, I messed up today. I didn't bring a projector, so I got hard copies, and so you guys can read ahead and ignore me if you want to. I do have extra copies in the back if anybody walked in without grabbing a copy. Sure. I'm not hearing, you're not hearing me? Okay. So the general manager pretty much covered what the next slide, slide 2, the reasons for the review. I'm going to go a little bit more deeper, though. The general manager was approved with 2 key assumptions. One, part-time, and if it was part-time with no benefits, it would be within cost parameters that are acceptable to the board. His experience, as he's mentioned, is he's consumed with transactional details or other issues that really should be done by somebody else, that, quite frankly, it should be paid less to do those things. It's not an efficient use of the general manager. It's difficult to stay part-time if he tries to do everything that people expect of him today. And he's also concerned about what's not getting done, because how this district, and it's not unique compared to a lot of different jurisdictions, things get assigned incrementally, year in and year out. And quite frankly, this is not the case in Kensington, but I get brought into organizations where there's incremental change, and then there's a big mistake, and there's a crisis, and they ask me to come in and help out. And so you kind of push the reset button, and you kind of get a physical exam, and you reorganize, and you put it in the cubby holes that make sense, that are cost effective. And that's kind of the first phase of what we're doing here. General manager is concerned about scope creep, where he ends up being a full-time position, and that's not what the expectation was when this position was approved. The board wanted a professional manager to assist in the more strategic priorities of the board, of the district, and also to hold the service providers accountable. You wanted somebody that was independent of actual service provision. And so, given the insert of a new general manager, it was time to reevaluate how things were divvied up. Because of the project budget parameters, this is I would say a 10,000-foot flyover. I could have easily gone down deeper into specific issues, and quite frankly, there's probably something I missed and didn't totally get, simply because I couldn't, there wasn't enough time to do it. But there will be time to spend more on some of these issues. So the next slide, slide 3, my actual presentation is the automated version that you missed. Actually has different chunks of the triangle with the pyramid slide in, and it looks a little bit more interesting. So I ask folks, I've been asking folks for 34 years of public service and 3 years of consulting, is how's your organization performing? Oh, we're doing great, we're doing great. We're high performers, we're awesome. Well, how do you know that? And that's when the answer starts. You get 100 different answers from 100 different people. And so I've put together this triangle to help explain how you know you're performing well as a public agency. And a public agency is different than the private sector. But private sectors are changing. And the big key difference is that first block, that base block that the general manager spoke to, what I call corporate support, accountability, and value systems. And I think this is unique for the public sector. And it's unique because there's such a high transparency standard that you folks know 99% of what goes on in the district. You do, because we have public records laws. We have the Brown Act. There's very few things that are an exception to the Brown Act, like personnel issues. But vast majority of it is open for public display, public evaluation, public criticism. And so the margin for unacceptable behavior is much lower in the public sector. I think the private sector is starting to show more interest in this first block. I think, I mean, you can just name them off. Enron, Wells Fargo, the 2008 meltdown of our economy that was, a couple notches short of a recession. Those are some examples of people losing their way. And when the lid got pulled off and we got to see how they operated, people were disgusted. So the question is, in the public agency, you get to see what happens weekly or monthly, or how often you want to get into the public records of the district. So this area has to be very well done. It's through transparency, are the people and the policies or the systems in place to have an ethical organization, a legal organization, an organization that has good teamwork, good leadership, and has high professional standards. And if you don't have that, and your stakeholders know that, you start losing your legitimacy in the eyes of the citizens. And that starts breaking down. And when you think about it, public agencies were created as a compact between the citizens and the board members and staff, that you're going to give us something, and in return, we're going to give you taxes. And you're going to operate ethically and professionally. So that's the first block. I call it the soul of the public agency. And it's the least sexy of all the functions. It's a pass, no pass. I can give you plenty of examples of public agencies melting down because they failed. They failed in this section right here. The cities that have gone bankrupt. The cities that, what was the city of Bell didn't go bankrupt. They lost their way in that first. I can give you lots of, Detroit, Stockton, San Bernardino. It wasn't a numbers issue. It's their corporate structure, how they operated, their value system fell apart. And over time, the rest of the services fell apart. So this is the first building block. Are you good at that? The next building block is ensuring excellent services. It's the bread and butter of public agencies. Do you provide excellent services? I can tell you with confidence, you can't provide good services if you haven't mastered the first block. You've got to master the first block in order to be good at the second block. And if you're providing good services, then to me, the high-performing organization is pursuing innovation and really focusing on strategic priorities and solving problems before they're at the doorstep of the public agency. And the innovation and focusing on the future, some examples for this district: police services, evaluating how you want to provide police services for the future. That's a once-in-a-generation kind of conversation, and high impact, potential high risk. That's a really strategic issue. This community center and redoing that for this district, I would say that's more focusing on the future, more innovative. I can give other examples, working with the fire district and Kensington Fire District. Parks and rec issues. There's a lot of areas where you can pursue innovation. So here's where the jurisdictions have problems between the governing body and the chief executive, is when the corporate support systems are not functioning well, and the chief executive is mired in that. And 99.9% of the time, the elected officials focus on the top of the triangle. That's why they got elected. And so if you get a chief executive, whether it's a city manager, a general manager, a county administrator, and they got their feet planted in the first block, and they got the board and the community wanting innovation and focus on the future, pretty soon they're pulled, and one of two things happened. The board and the community get very disappointed. I'm sorry. The board gets very disappointed, the community gets very disappointed in the performance of their chief executive, or the chief executive just gets up and leaves. That happens a lot. I would say that's the biggest function, the biggest source for dysfunction in jurisdictions. So we looked at that first building block primarily. So the next page, page 4, what are the roles and duties of a general manager? What should the chief executive do? Well, they need to make sure that first block is functioning well, things are in place, but done by somebody else. Second, hold service providers accountable, not just police, but anybody else that provides services on behalf of the district, and either do that directly or through someone else. And then really the big thing for chief executives is partner with the board and really the community, pursue those strategic priorities to make your community better. That's what the role and the duties of the general manager is. So what's the goal of this project? It was to look at that first block, see how it's functioning, are things being fulfilled and addressed properly, and possibly freeing up the general manager to pursue those other two roles. So the project methodology, page 5. It's very simple because the budget parameters. Surveyed employees. The survey was attached to the report. Do extensive interviews of employees, review some of the documentation, the policy documents, and then provide the employees an opportunity to respond to the draft report. And they gave some good feedback, especially in the area of history and how we got to where we are. So it's important that these observations and these recommendations, it's not about people's performance. It's not a reflection on performance. Employees were very helpful with this project. They're doing the best they can, given a very conservatively funded district with a backdrop of a lot of changes in the district management over the last 3 to 5 years. So I want to go through each of the areas. And I should caveat it and say, this is page 7, if you're following along. My recommendations may create some disagreement. There may create some discomfort in some circles. And for that I apologize, but if I focused on avoiding disagreement and avoiding discomfort, then you're not going to get your value out of this project, plain and simple. I'll let you decide what works for you, but I'm saying right up front, there'll be people that will disagree with some of this. So the clerk of the board. The clerk of the board is the gatekeeper and the support for both the board and the general manager. And a lot of it's got to do with board meetings and committee meetings, both preparing for the board meeting, conducting the board meeting, and following up and making sure whatever decisions are made, they're executed. Not in the sense of what the general manager does, but you approve a contract, making sure that contract is signed before goods are received or services are received. You approved authority to do X, Y, or Z, making sure that that doesn't slip through the cracks. That we don't start conducting business without following through with the paperwork, for example. Central filing system is another thing. That's main function of the clerk of the board. And there's a lot of preparation for the agenda process that community doesn't see. Some of you have seen. It needs to be done coordinated, efficiently, and certain people have their fingers on it and provide input. So my observations. This duty has been shared among individuals. The standards for the process, I think, could be improved upon. The backup and cross-training, I think that could be improved, where that becomes an issue. Vacations, people are sick. Sometimes follow-up decisions were not secured or executed after the board made a decision, or it was unclear and nobody followed up on it. The board policies and procedures manual is not current. It's lacking some things that are typically found in the policies and procedures manual. It is your document that tells how you're going to operate, but it provides some policy direction on how the district is going to operate. Human resource policies, financial policies. How do you want the district to be managed from a financial perspective? Here's a controversial one in this district: board meetings. I've never seen board minutes, the detail that you folks put together. I mean, I have never seen board minutes with the details that you go to great lengths to make sure everything's accurate, every word is accurate, the syntax is accurate. What 99.9% of public agencies do is they focus on memorializing the decisions that the board makes and then the deliberation and how you made that decision. That's typically the focus on most minutes, action minutes, summary minutes. So recommendations, you ought to consider updating your board's policies and procedures. It's a common practice in public agencies. Clarify who's fully charged as the clerk of the board, and clarify all those listed duties, and that person has both the authority and the responsibility to deal with it. It's my understanding that the district administrator has stepped up and taken on some of those duties. I think it would be helpful to clarify the full list. And then you might want to consider alternatives to minutes. Most folks rely on audio, video collection of public comment. So the next is asset management. It's about ensuring proper maintenance, proper asset performance, and the eventual replacement, parks, community center, technology, and fleet. Those are your primary assets. The observations that I saw are it's unclear who has that role of managing the assets. Again, maintenance, asset performance, and timely replacement. Heard a great presentation on the community center remodel. My recommendation is the general manager and staff that book usage and is involved in the operating of the community center be more engaged in the remodel project. Eventually, you're going to set budget parameters, and you're going to build. Somebody's going to be project manager, and somebody's going to oversee the construction, and they're going to be accountable to the board, and typically that is the general manager. You got to talk about financing scenarios. Looks like your target just got improved hugely, but what's the financial strategy for paying for the balance? And are you going to finance it? Can you finance it? How does the financing market look? Are you going to rely on grants? Are you going to rely on your general fund? Those are all pieces that would typically come from staff. There is no asset replacement fund or program. Typically, public agencies look at their technology and their fleet, and they can guesstimate when they're going to need to replace it. And they start putting money aside during that life cycle, so when it's ready to be replaced, the money is there, rather than 5 years down the road go, oh God, I got to replace this and that. How do I squeeze that in the budget? It's typically planned ahead of time. So the recommendations is make it clear who has that asset management responsibility, formulate an asset replacement program along with a financing component, ultimately develop the financing plan for the community center, and general manager and staff get more engaged with the community center project. IT didn't spend a lot of time there. Technology is so important for all the stakeholders. Citizens use the technology to find out what's going on. There's a lot of people here, but there's a lot of people at home. How do they find out what's happening at the district? How do they get information? Technology is key. Elected officials use technology to fulfill their role, and service providers, obviously. And then technology is key in efficiency, right? That's another component. So it's part of fulfilling the roles of the stakeholders, but it also is about making the district as efficient as possible. Observations, again, 10,000-foot flyover. It's not centralized. It hasn't been assigned. There's various vendors that have pieces. And the payroll system is highly manual. Anytime there's spreadsheets and it requires a lot of human intervention, that's old. You open yourself up to errors, or you open yourself up to risk if somebody leaves or gets sick. That is, I think, in payroll, that's an unacceptable risk. And everything might be going just fine up till now, but you are exposed to some risk. At a minimum, you're spending a lot of money to care and feed of the payroll system. So recommendation is to assign responsibility to manage the IT oversight, ensure vendors are coordinated, and to seek an alternative to the payroll system. Customer citizen point of contact. This area has the most impact on how people perceive the district, right? It's people answering the phones that interact with more citizens than any of us. Is it consistent, reliable, available when people want it? Is it responsive? The observations are, it's a shared responsibility between two folks that are part-time. Solid waste provider has a key component with citizen interaction. So you have an investment on how they're performing, you should be monitoring that. And there's no documented standards, at least I didn't see them, and maybe I missed them, of what are your hours of operation? Are you going to have somebody at lunchtime? When does it open up? When does it end? When is it acceptable to let it go to voicemail? When do you need a warm body? It's not rocket science. It's just developing some standards, some expectation. So the recommendations, document standards, and clarify it, and consider sitting down with the solid waste provider on an annual basis and look at how they are outreaching to the community and how are they responding to inquiries. Because I heard that some of that's backing into our folks. Our folks are answering some of that stuff. So the question is why, and it's good to check in every once in a while. Solid waste provider performance. Ensuring that vendors' performance consistent with the contractual requirements, understanding the state regulatory context, heavily regulated, monitoring the financial performance of the vendor, and consider changes to the contract as needed. These contracts are typically long because they need to amortize the expensive equipment. There is no way you're going to anticipate everything that first contract. And so being on top of that and sitting down with the vendor and making changes is perfectly appropriate during the life of that contract. Observations, I didn't see a robust resource or clarity on who's monitoring that contract and sitting down and understanding it and are experts in that contract, in the solid waste service delivery. I notice this is another maybe discomfort area for the board. Franchise fee, 7%. You might want to look at what other jurisdictions are getting and whether or not you want to consider increasing that. Some folks have done that. The recommendation is to assign that to one person to pursue. Parks and Recreation. I don't quite fully, I realize there's a KCC is providing the service. The way I see it, you have an interest in what they're doing. You have an interest in both parks and recreation. And it's in your interest to sit down and discuss your goals from a park standpoint and a recreation standpoint. and pursuing your goals through KCC and other parties. I think that's something healthy that should happen every couple of years. So, observations. I haven't seen any sort of board policy or performance goals with respect to the recreation program or the two assets. District employee, we have a district employee that acts as a liaison to schedule repairs and the use of facilities, but not really program performance. And here's another discomfort area, fee schedule. It's a very old fee schedule. You might want to consider updating it. Yes, that might be an issue of considering increasing fees, but how that typically goes is you look at what other providers are charging and getting, and what are you charging, and oftentimes, if you haven't looked at it for 10 years, oftentimes there's room to increase the fee and produce more revenue to your budget. So, recommendations. I skipped down this one. Review and update the fee schedule. But up above it, district staff and board committees should identify, monitor, and discuss performance and the policy goals of the district. Public information and engagement. This is a real big deal in public agencies, and it's the most challenging because the technology is changing and people's livelihoods are changing, and so how to communicate two-way with folks is becoming more and more difficult because the tools are changing and the expectations are changing. But it doesn't mean you give up and don't attack that or go after that. I didn't see a plan or assigned role to effectuate any plan with respect to reaching out to the community and getting information or sharing information on an ongoing basis. Technology can be a big part of that. With regard engagement, for a small jurisdiction, I was surprised you had 8 board committees. That oftentimes requires staff support in one shape or another. Even if the staff's not there attending every meeting, eventually you're going to want to pursue stuff, and it's eventually going to come back to staff. Your board meetings are well attended, and what I always think about is it's great that your board meetings are well attended, but how many people are not attending? And they should have benefit of what's going on. So recommendations: develop a realistic public information and engagement program that's within your fiscal capacity, and review your 8 committees and consider consolidating or eliminating them. On the legal side, page 14, didn't spend any time talking to your chief counsel. My only key point is whatever new policies and procedures you develop, the chief counsel has to be involved. Finance, budgeting, and accounting. What is that? It's multiple components. It's the internal controls to safeguard your assets. I can list off some jurisdictions where that broke down and quite a bit of assets disappeared out the back door. Developing and implementing fiscal management policies and practices, ensuring both short-term and long-term solvency for the district. Ensuring transparency by developing and controlling a budget and financial statements. Ensuring compliance with state and federal law and board policy. Those are the things that function should be doing. My observations: there's no comprehensive fiscal policies from the board. The district budget process and document doesn't conform with what your general manager and I would call sort of best management practices. The budget has different roles. One, it's a planning document. One, it's a control document. How do you control expenditures? It's a policy and priority setting document. You use the budget process to set priorities and set policy. And it's a communication vehicle. It communicates to the citizens where their money is going, what are the priorities. If we do X, Y, or Z, what does it mean both short-term and long-term? A lot of those components are missing out of your budget process. The district is missing sort of the equivalent of a chief financial officer. My feeling is that there's various people that have pieces of it. There's some that think they do, but there's no central, to me, that has a high-functioning fiscal management skill set. So my recommendation is to create a part-time CFO, not full-time, just part-time. Improve the budget, replace the payroll system, enhance the long-term fiscal planning and forecasting. CFO will facilitate realistic conversations about a concern I know the Finance Committee has about retiree health and PERS obligations, and constantly obsess and talk about the long-term financial wherewithal of the district. Human resources management. This is about ensuring the district has capable workforce, it's well-trained, equitably compensated, treated fairly, it's accountable for their performance, and has entry points to address concerns. What are my observations? Well, number one, there's no way I would ever justify an HR staff person for the district this size. But knowing the history of the district, I think if there's been any sort of crises or challenges, or if there was any discord in the district, it's pretty much all human resource issues that have a human resource bent. The job descriptions, they're not independently developed using HR standards. They're not adopted by the board. Every public agency jurisdiction has their job descriptions adopted by the board. Performance evaluations were completed by previous management, but they're coming past due. State and federal law changes every year in this area, and it requires you to be current on it. There's a limitation on what you can ask about past compensation when you're hiring somebody. There's a limitation on what you can ask about criminal record for some jurisdictions. Every year there's something change. You gotta be on top of it. What I'm suggesting is invest in a one-time review of your HR practices and develop some policies if there's some missing, and update and train staff, and then leave. Complete updated performance reviews, and then use an independent resources to update your job descriptions and related compensation. And I'll talk more about that. So what I'm saying is you need to suggest you redefine the roles and duties of staff. That first block in that triangle should be assigned and organized with new job descriptions with similar knowledge, skills, and abilities. You have folks that are doing professional work and doing clerical work. I think you can rearrange your staff and assign the clerical work to a position and pay it less, and then identify professional work and pay that person appropriate. There's a way to, I think, reorganize. So one possible scenario, just one idea, is update the general manager job description. It's not clear what's expected of him today. The last job description was done, it looks like about 10 years ago, and it is dated, and it was back when there was a chief of police and general manager. I think there's a possible job for a business support manager or technician that assumes some of that higher level duties to support the general manager, and maybe jettison some of the clerical duties and give it to administrative assistant, which would be largely clerical. These are all part-time positions, by the way. A CFO, assuming a professional fiscal advisor duties, and you have a police services specialist that does police work as well as clerical work. We might be able to make it so that that person is just dedicated to the police department and police services. Another recommendation. I don't know when the timing is for you, when it's right for you, but every governing body, a high-functioning governing body and the general manager, gets off the treadmill once a year, or once every 2 years, and reflect on the state of the district, in this case, look out in the future, what emerging opportunities or threats are happening to the district, and develop annual or biannual goals that are realistic given the capacity of the district. And this be done in open session. Your board policies, if you read it, it implies you do this in closed session with the general manager as part of his performance review. Those are separate. You have a public discussion about this, you get public input. And my observation is I haven't seen evidence of this in the recent past. Staff told me that years ago that was indeed done. Recommendation is consider a workshop to fulfill these goals I described above. And when I talk about the budget, so how it typically is you develop these goals, typically 1 or 2 year goals, and then the budget comes along and the general manager puts together a budget that effectuates or implements these goals. And what good is it to have goals if you're not going to put money to it and make it happen? So the budget document talks about the goals and how the budget is going to implement those. That's how the budget becomes a planning document, supports the goal setting. So suggested next steps. Memorialize the new district administrative and support structure, assign duties to job descriptions with similarly required skill sets. Professional here, clerical here. Write new job descriptions and set compensation appropriately. Consider commissioning a one-time review of the HR area, as I discussed earlier. And then after the HR thing is done, consider updating the board policies and procedures manual using best practices, inserting HR policies and a finance component. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do you want to, go ahead.
Bob, on page 17, you talk about the various roles and duties and your possible scenarios. How would you work the clerk of the board?
How would I work?
Well, you don't address, at least I don't see in your one possible scenario, duties that would be.
Okay. This is a scenario, possibility. I think that you can have the business support person be responsible for making sure everything is done, but some of it be done by the administrative assistant. Let me give you one example. Minutes. I'm sorry. Minutes. I can't sit still. All right. More. Oh. Is that okay? Can you hear me? All right. I feel like I'm going to blast you out, but all right.
We spent a lot of money on it.
So I would assign the clerk of the board duties that are clerical. I would have an administrative assistant do it, but the business support person would be responsible for getting it done. It would be, the business support person would be professional and so would get a higher wage in the labor market, right? To compete if you want to get somebody. And so it only makes sense to let them do just the professional stuff.
All right, any other questions from the board currently? All right, comments from the public? Anyone have any questions or comments? Come on up.
A. Stevens Dilk. I think you concluded that the district's contract with Bayview Refuge and Recycling may not be well managed. I've been trying for 4 months to get information about Kensington's compliance with state solid waste diversion goals, maybe going back to, say, 1997, the beginning of Bayview's last contract, which calls for reports each quarter or each year at the very least. However, no reports from earlier than mid-2014 can be found in district office. No reports before the middle of 2014. And there seems to be a problem with getting the reports as replacement reports of whatever. At the end of September, and again, I say I've been trying since June to get this information. I'm on the Solid Waste Committee, and it's in part in dealing with that. In September, at the end of September, I actually went to the extreme action of sending in an official request through the Public Records Act. I still have not been able to get the information. I think it's not in the office, and it seems to be that nobody can get it from Bayview. It seems to me Bayview is the classic example of the tail wagging the dog. Also, you mentioned the franchise fee as a source of more revenue. Of course, per Proposition 218, this would be restricted to expenses related to waste management. Is that not correct? Since the district doubled its franchise fee from 2% to 4% 2 years ago, exactly zero has been spent by the district on waste management. So why do we need to increase it more? Currently, the district gets about $55,000 a year to manage waste management. And I don't think they're doing much management. And finally, I would like to say that Kensington property owners pay $3.2 million in ad valorem and special taxes for the district's police and recreation services. We pay Bayview an additional $1.3 million for the district's refuge and recycling service. That is almost 30% of the total. And I think more should be done by the district to assure property owners that their needs are met and that their money is well spent.
Thank you.
I didn't specifically say Bayview was not well managed or poorly managed. I don't have enough details to have a feel for that. But those kinds of questions you have about quarterly reports, the financial reports are typically expected of solid waste providers. A lot of jurisdictions don't realize you can actually audit their books if you want to. So there's a lot of reporting that is in your contract. And I think the issue is just assigning that task to somebody to bone up on that contract and the law and sit down with the vendor and get your questions answered and talk about performance.
All right, I spoke with Director Welsh about this item. He encouraged us, as I will encourage my fellow board members, to accept Mr. Dice's report. And my personal comments, thank you, Bob. This was very informative. I know not as detailed as you would like or we would like at this point, but it actually addresses many of the concerns I've had about the district. I know that we are legally out of compliance with certain mandates that we need to follow as a special district currently, and we have others looming on the horizon. We have a new structure. There are gaps in the way that tasks have been administered, and we have folks, from my personal observation, definitely out of role, out of step, or just generally confused. That's usually the board members. So, but we often have board members doing functions, or perhaps thinking they can do functions that are not maybe in the best interest of the district, or we have board members needing support. We are legally required to have a clerk or secretary of the board. We do have one, but that is a person who's also overwhelmed with other duties. So we're not able to administer that. And as you've heard, maybe our PRA requests sometimes run behind, and we are not executing services to the community, I think, in the manner that we hope to do. So I would first like to make a motion to accept Bob's report.
I will second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so that motion passes, and thank you. And secondly, Director Welsh asked that we request that Mr. Dice prepare a more extensive cost estimate for outlining some of the recommendations that he had for us. So specifically, I think I can break those down into 3 or 4 areas that I would be interested in seeing. That is reevaluating our policy and procedures manual, creating job descriptions or categorization, supplying us with policies and best practices, specifically those related to the fiscal arena, and probably supplying us with recommendations for an HR, human resources review personnel.
And also a timeline to accomplish all of those tasks.
So any further comment or, okay. So I would like to make a motion that we request that, and Director Welsh wanted to add post haste, if you could, and I'm not sure. So
I'll second that.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes 4-0. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, if you had comments, Gail, please. I didn't mean to take a vote before you commented.
Gail Feldman. I don't have your agenda in front of me, so I don't know what you're specifically asking. Are you just asking for him to give you a cost estimate to do that work?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I wasn't clear. All right.
Yes, yeah, we're not. Yes, Bob prepared this work under the direction of the general manager, but we realized that probably those costs exceed the spending limit that we have. Would you like to come forward and ask a question? Please, make a comment.
Celia Conkus. I realize that in a short amount of time, it's very difficult to know the history of many of these areas that perhaps are inadequate or why things are the way they are. And it probably would take too much time for people or for you to meet with people and also Tony to find out the history. But for example, you know, the history of making changes in the policy and procedures manual, that goes on for years and years, and there were major efforts to make changes. The role of the general manager, the split between the general manager and the chief of police really just occurred. And to my knowledge, there was never a specific description of what the role of the general manager was to be. I could be wrong. The history of how the franchise tax got to be increased and why it is so very specific to be used for such limited purposes. It's basically people are being forced to provide money that's put into a fund and there's no access to it. We can't use it. So there's a lot of history, and I don't quite know how to impart this and how to proceed and what the best set of priorities might be.
We're going to have Ann address just one of those issues because it's come up recently, and there's been some new legal history on the franchise fee.
Yeah. Before I finish here, there are nagging issues for all of us about what is happening with members of the police department. And I understand that there's a police officer's Bill of Rights. We're not allowed to hear about certain things. But I am wondering if there isn't some clue as to what we might know about. I mean, if we have an officer who is on disability and it's been going on for 15 months or more, and is there some way we could find out the conclusion of that? That's just one example.
Please answer, yes.
I actually cannot speak to that because it is not a matter on tonight's agenda. So I apologize for that, but we are limited by the evening's agenda. As to the franchise fee issue, that's an interesting story. Historically, franchise fees have not been considered fees within the meaning of Proposition 218. They are not for the purpose of, pardon me in advance if I'm getting too much into insider baseball, they're not for the purpose of repaying the agency for the cost of providing a service. They're actually a fee imposed for the use of the agency's facilities. It's a little arcane, but that's the nature of a franchise fee. So there's been some question recently as to whether or not they should be considered fees under Proposition 218. And the nature of that debate has resulted in some agencies, like this one, in being very conservative with their franchise fees and putting them in a separate fund and not spending them unless there's a reason to do so connected to waste management because of this concern that some court might ultimately rule that it is indeed a Proposition 218 fee and you're not allowed to spend that on anything else. As luck would have it, this past summer, the California Supreme Court ruled that franchise fees are not, in fact, subject to Proposition 218, which means that they may be used at the discretion of the district. They can be used for any legitimate public purpose, but that was not something you could be sure of until quite recently.
Okay. And the wonderful thing I think about working with our general manager, working with Bob Dice, is that while we are a unique community and have a unique history, there are other agencies and professional standards that provide a roadmap for us. We currently have a copy of the CSDA's policy and procedure manual template, which we could be looking at in terms of dovetailing with our own policy and procedure manual to improve and update our policies. So that's what the basis I think I would like to see the board operating from is what's the professional standard? What regulations must we adhere to? Where are the gaps? And go from that point of view, because then we can bring our own unique slant or tailor-made policies that we need, or services that we want to provide to our community and for our residents. But we're going to start with the regulations first. Unfortunately, that protects the district, protects the taxpayer.
Excuse me, I just want to note that it's 9:45-ish.
Thank you. Yes, we need to make a motion to continue. I'd like to make the motion that we continue until 10:30, if we are able to do
I
that.
will second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes. I just don't want to keep you here forever. I know it's been a long rainy day. All right, do we have any further comments about this item? And if we do not, we will continue on to item 8B, hearing our staff report on clean energy. It appears on page 48 of the agenda. And our district administrator prepared this, and we'll present the item, if I can.
Thank you, Madam President. At the last board meeting, I was directed to find out what additional cost would be involved with going to the standard of what is called deep green. I contacted Mr. Killigrew at the Marin Clean Energy, and he examined 1 year's worth of electric bills for this building, which I had provided to him, and he ascertained that the additional cost for receiving clean energy, which would be provided by solar or wind, would be between $6 and $8 per month. So I leave it up to the board to decide how it would like to proceed and what direction it would like to provide staff from here. Thank you.
I have a question about the rec building. Is that completely covered by KCC and we never see bills for that?
That is correct.
So they get them directly?
Yes,
And what,
But that is an asset owned by the district?
that is correct.
and what about the public safety building? Don't we pay for part of the electricity of that building too?
We do. The fire district is in total control of how it would proceed if it wanted to participate in the clean energy program.
Okay.
All right, any public comment? All right, I'll make a board comment. I think this is a valuable adoption, and I think it reflects our values as a community and as a board. I also am excited by thinking about that the renovation might even drop that lower, and maybe it's not going to be $80 a year. But I think that it's worthy. It's a 1 month rental on our payphone back in the corner, which is $78 a month, if God forbid any of us ever need to use it. But it's there. It's if you never need to. By the drinking fountains. And our defibrillator. So defibrillator, am I saying that correctly at this late in the evening? Any other further comment?
I just have a question. Do you have, I'm assuming, like an email or something from Mr. Killigrew, or is this a phone conversation?
Email.
Okay. We've got basically in writing is what I'm asking.
Yes, I have it in writing.
Okay.
Of course.
Go ahead.
Hi, guys. And Lynn, thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome.
Lynn very kindly copied me on the email exchange with JR at MCE. And so I got to see the PG&E bills for this building. So I only got around to it this evening. Very quickly kind of assessed if you guys had, if MCE had been here last year or over the last 12 months and you made the decision to opt up, to be a bit more exact, the cost for this last 12 months would have been $63 for the whole year to have opted up. So on a monthly basis, that would have been about just a touch over $5 a month.
All right, so were we mid-motion? Is that where we were? I apologize, were we?
Yes.
Okay.
If you would
So I-
make a motion and then provide additional direction if so.
I would make a motion that we adopt the deep green option for marine clean energy that will provide 100% of clean energy for the community center and direct staff to convey our choice to MCE.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 4-0.
I would also ask that that staff maybe discuss this with KCC regarding the rec building, since it is technically a district asset and the cost is so minimal. I would like to encourage them to do that. I'm not sure I can mandate it, and I'm sure that Kensington Green Group can talk to the leadership of KCC if that becomes necessary, but I hope it wouldn't be, and I just would like us to look in that direction for that, and if they have any objection, then we can continue to discuss it, but I'm hopeful that they won't.
I'll contact them tomorrow or Monday.
And I'll request, I guess, that if either staff or the Kensington Green Group hears that the KFPD Kensington Fire Protection District is considering this item, that you let us know. We'll try and be in contact with them directly as well, so that we can make our opinion known for the public safety building. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to new business, item 9B. The board will discuss, and this is a first reading of the board ordinance, which is on page 79.
Excuse me,
sorry.
did you want to address 8C?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. Thank you. Let's first go to item 8C on page 54. I'm sorry. The general manager was hoping to get out of having to give us an update.
I thought that was a very fast staff report, so. This is related to the police services request for proposal, and the staff report summarizes the process. The interviews did occur on November 3rd for 2 firms, and the interview panel selected one of them for reference checks, and I have really completed most of the reference checking. I think there's one more call I'd like to make, but I can really say that one of the firms, the firm that was selected, has been getting excellent references, and that firm is Matrix that was selected by the interview panel. The 2 quotes that came in from the 2 firms, I had estimated roughly that the quotes would be in the $50,000 to $100,000 range, and the one of the quotes was $94,000, and the other quote was $74,000. Matrix's quote was the lower one at $74,000. The primary motivation, though, was the thought of the interview panel was that they just met the needs of the district more fully, and that they were selected, and it happened that they were the one with the lower quote. What I'd like to do is schedule a special meeting, and I have a suggested date for Wednesday, November 29 at 7 o'clock. It really is at the option of the board, both the date and time. I have confirmed with Matrix that they are available on that date. And I've also asked them to make a presentation of how they're going to do this analysis. And we'll also include a copy of their proposal so the public can see the actual response on the request for proposal. And we'd like to encourage the public to attend the meeting so that they can participate and see an overview of the process before it commences. With that, that is my recommendation at this time.
I suggest that we direct staff to schedule a special meeting of the Board of Directors for Wednesday, November 29th at 7 p.m. That will take the place of the regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting. I would like Since my Finance Committee members already have that scheduled, it will be helpful because they'll be able to be in attendance and offer comment.
Is it possible we could add other items to that meeting if necessary?
Yes. All right. Then if there are no objection, I think we would like to direct staff. We don't need to make a motion. We're just going to.
Consensus will suffice.
Yes.
I just wanted to note, though, that we would get the agenda out next week, which is a short week.
Yes.
And so we don't have time to really have a, if you have an item to add, we should know by Monday.
Yes, we would definitely like, that will need to be published before Wednesday.
I'm not sure I do, I just wanted to ask the question.
But if you do, just let me know, and I'll be glad to put it on.
All right. So now we will move on to Ms. Danforth's item on page 79 of the agenda.
Yes, President Sharon Swat and members of the board, I'll try to be brief given the lateness of the hour. It is an unfortunate fact of public agency life that where there is publicly owned land, there are frequently encroachments. And I understand that this has been a matter of some concern off and on for years in this particular agency. One of the problems that encroachments pose is that the people who install the encroachments may not voluntarily choose to remove them, even upon request by the actual owner of the land. And the process of compelling them to remove their encroachments can be quite expensive, which means that either the agency is faced with the choice of either incurring significant costs to remove the encroachments or simply allowing the third party to privatize what ought to be free for use as public land. There are fortunately other agencies before us who have faced this problem, and so what I'm offering is not a novel solution. It is more tailored than some agencies do, but it is simply this: a process that will allow the agency to first issue a notice of violation and compliance order to anyone who is responsible for unpermitted encroachments on public land. If that notice and order would provide a date for compliance and the steps necessary for compliance, which might include restoring the property to its pre-encroachment condition. If the guilty party does not remove the encroachment by that date, they would be faced with both citations and an abatement process. They would be responsible for all of the costs incurred by the agency during that process. They would also be responsible for daily fines after the compliance date has passed. And ultimately, if they do not pay the costs and the fines, they would have a lien imposed against their property, which the district could foreclose upon. That would be an extreme step, but the option is there. Frequently, I find that the availability of measures like this frequently obliviates the need to actually use them, because the property owners suddenly see a fairly stiff consequence. You'll notice if you, in reading the ordinance, that there are several points for the property owner to raise any objections that they have. This is both a matter of fundamental fairness and also to make sure that the district doesn't proceed down this, road to abatement till the end, only to find out that in fact it's not district land after all. So there's an opportunity after receiving the notice of violation and compliance order to file an appeal. There's another opportunity after the compliance date is passed, if the violator believes that they've in fact complied with the requirements of the law. And then there's yet another hearing at the abatement process. So this may seem unduly complex, but I believe that is the most cost-effective manner of proceeding and the manner that is most consistent with procedures that have been approved by the courts. So I'm happy to take any questions. If there are no questions, I want to point out that there is a particular process that has to be followed when a public agency is adopting an ordinance. It's not, it's a bit more cumbersome than adopting a resolution. After holding a hearing on the ordinance, the board should introduce and hold first reading of the ordinance. The law requires that the entire ordinance be read at this point, unless the board passes a motion to read by title only. If they pass such a motion, then the president would simply read the title of the ordinance. And at that point, there would be a motion to pass first reading of the ordinance. That motion would be done by roll call vote. And the item would then be continued to the next regular meeting for second reading and adoption of the ordinance. And just as a side note, the ordinance does have to be adopted at a regular meeting, so it would come back at the regular meeting in December. Are there any questions?
I have two questions. First one is, who enforces the citations, the abatement, the daily fines? Who delivers them and who enforces them?
That would be the manager, or most importantly, his designated person. I would suspect that members of the police force would actually deliver the notices, except if the owner lives out of town, in which case we'd use certified mail or something like that.
And secondly, if we have sent previous notices, do they count, or do we need to restart this process?
We need to restart the process. It's not retroactive. Oh, I wanted to point out one last thing. You may have noticed that you have copies of the ordinance separate from your packet. Director Natoli was kind enough to point out to me a typo on page 9. Subsection B, near the top, should read as follows, and this is how it reads in your corrected version. Where a violation is considered a misdemeanor, under Section 3A, Romanet 3, the civil penalties assessed for each violation shall not exceed $1,000 per day per violation. Excuse me. And it would be considered a misdemeanor only at the discretion of the manager and only if it was a repeat offense.
Great. Are there any other public comments or questions? About this item only, yes. All right. If so, I make a motion that we accept this as a first reading by reading the title of the, and do I need to read the title?
You move to read by title.
I move to read by title. And do we now need to take a roll call vote on
I
this?
second it.
All right, okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, I shall now read the title of the ordinance. Now, do I need to make a motion before we?
No, you read the title, and then you wait, then you make the motion second, roll
Okay.
call vote.
All right, here we go. The Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. This is an ordinance of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District prohibiting unauthorized encroachments on district land and adopting procedures, penalties, and other remedies for such encroachments. This is ordinance number 2017-01. All right. I make a motion that we accept this as a first reading.
Second.
All right.
Lynn, would you like to call the roll call vote, or?
Director Hessai,
Aye.
Vice President Natoli,
Aye.
President Sherris-Watt,
Aye.
Director Deppie.
Aye.
The vote is 4-0. The motion passes.
All right. This thrilling document will come back on December 14th.
Hopefully by title only.
Yes, by title only. Yes. If you would like to get my full reading of this on Audible, no, I'm sorry.
I have a question. My understanding is that this document needs to be posted.
It does. If we post it in full, which is I think what we worked out would be the most efficient means of doing it, it has to be done within 50 days of passage, which would be December, 15 days.
Thank you.
All right, we move on to item 9C with Chief of Police Ricky Holt will discuss discrepancies in our recent police statistics reports.
Hello, everyone. Okay, last month, Mr. Watt had noticed a significant mistake in the count of police statistics from the 2 months that were in the agenda. What I discovered, it was my error. For instance, one of the months was approximately 300 and about 50 total incidents. The next month, it showed 2,510 incidents. So what I discovered was the new program that we have, RIMS, keeps statistics for 5 entities. It keeps statistics for the Albany Fire Department, the Albany Police Department, the Albany Public Works Department, the East Bay Regional Police Department, and the Kensington Police Department. What I didn't do on the month that showed the 2,510 incidents was I did not narrow the parameters of the search. So there's a box that if you leave it blank, it will total all the statistics from all the agencies at part of that system. What I should have did was put in the Kensington parameter, and it would have narrowed it down. What's on the back table is there's copies of the August statistics that reflect the correct Kensington statistics. So, going through this list, if there was one positive thing based upon my interpretation of these stats, is when you get down to some of the traffic information. What's consistent is the traffic information, both when all the entities were tallied and when just the single Kensington activity entity was tallied. Given the fact that those numbers remain the same, my interpretation of this is that both of these sheets reflect the Kensington activity. Recently, I had a meeting with everyone and discovered that these numbers are not reflective of the true activity because there were a couple of officers that were entering the data in a section of the software that did not register when I went to total the monthly statistics. That has been corrected. So going forward, we should see a more accurate reflection of both the total citations, which is a combination of the moving citations, moving tickets for traffic violations, and tickets issued to parked vehicles. And with that, does anyone have any questions concerning this issue? Sure. Oh, no. Yes, ma'am.
Come to the mic, come to the mic.
My question was about the format. There's, when I first started looking at it, there's a long list of all different types of crimes and incidents, and so it's 2 parts. One is that, does that apply to all of the jurisdictions that are using this database, or is something tailored for Kensington? And is there any, third one, is there some things that you just don't understand when you're looking at it because they're abbreviated? And is there any kind of, footnotes or anything for this?
I think I do. Let me take a swing at it. The section of the statistics that I'm speaking about now are simply related to patrol statistics. And yes, the rest of the information that was part of the packet, its parameters are for Kensington only. This is the only area where that mistake was made. So everything else accurately reflects the Kensington activity. And could you remind me one more of the last question? Abbreviations. Yeah. If I recall correctly, I thought there were some abbreviations, and then in the next column,
Yeah, there is, the first column under incident type is the abbreviation, then it says description.
Yeah, under the description column.
Yeah, it's page 38 and 39.
Okay.
Sure. Any further questions?
Well, before you go or talk about traffic, I'm not sure if we're going to, is there any information you can share with the public about our recent success of, by officers?
Yes, I can. I was going to have that be a part of my traffic
All right, well,
discussion.
go, I'm sorry, I won't.
Since there's no more questions, I guess this is
Just was afraid that you were not going to, for want of a better phrase, toot your own horn, so I thought I would, to do with.
Okay, I guess this is a good time to segue into one of the concerns that was expressed by Director Deppie, which had to do with traffic enforcement. And some of the ideas that we have to kind of increase or have more of a presence on the traffic enforcement side. We met in my office and had a brief discussion concerning this. And the most important thing that I want the public to understand is currently the police department is operating with 7 officers. And of those 7 officers, 4 of them are working patrol. So theoretically, what we have is 1 officer working day shift patrol and 1 officer working graveyard patrol. What you have on duty for at least 4 of the other days is a sergeant, a detective, and the chief of police. As the activity throughout the day happens, both the sergeant, the detective, and the chief of police will act as cover units and sometimes primary units when the day shift patrol officer is tied up. As it stands currently, there are places where the day shift patrol officer is mandated to be at certain times throughout the day. Since there's only 1 officer during the day, that officer is pretty much handling everything that comes into the department in a patrol related capacity. It could be activity at the front door. He could be called in because activity that's coming over the phone. He's handling dispatch calls. He's handling some of the security details, whatever it needs to be. And when on those days where things get busy, you'll have the sergeant, you'll have the detective, and the chief of police will go out and assist some of the activity on the day shift calls for service. Now, for solutions. The biggest solution that I can suggest is to see if we can hire 2 more police officers to fill in so that we could have some more patrol coverage during the day. You can simply have 1 officer that's focused on patrol, and you can have a 2nd officer that's focused on traffic. You will have, contrary to popular belief, the day shift in Kensington can get busy, which is why the sergeant, the detective, and the chief of police often comes out of the building to assist with the patrol activity. So if we want a more robust traffic enforcement, my solution would be twofold: to increase the number of patrol officers that we have that can dedicate to patrol, and a change in the schedule. In my opinion, that would be the best solution for the traffic concerns as was expressed by Director Deppie. Give me 1 second. Now, what we have happening now, it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, all attention has to kind of be shifted toward the resolution of a situation. We have had, our employees have just discovered and solved crimes that entail approximately 20 staged home break-ins between Richmond, El Cerrito, and Kensington. The investigation to solve these particular crimes has been labor-heavy, patrol-heavy, and has taken some assistance from all the members in the police department. When these crimes occur and the department is investigating these crimes with the 7 members that I had mentioned, you can probably take 5 members now toward that investigation. So what happens is we have the sergeant and we have the detective who are going to be managing and supervising this investigation. And as evidence is collected, victims located, victims called in to identify their property, someone has to be at those incidents to man those incidents to make sure that they go slowly. The most important thing, what has to happen now is the streets also have to be covered by a patrolman. So in a situation like this, where we have the possibility of solving approximately 20 crimes with a department with only 7 people, that could cover possibly 3, possibly 5 cities. I can't express to you the commitment that is being expressed by the officers of this department that's participating in that investigation, and those who want to participate in it but understand they have to patrol the streets, which the fun part is getting involved in the investigation. So, questions? Oh, yes.
It hurts me to walk. I fell about 3 weeks ago. I took off at the Albuquerque airport before I got on the plane, and I'm feeling about 10 years older than I am. So having lodged my complaint with life, 2 questions. One is I'm confused about the 4 jurisdictions and the 20 crimes. So I didn't quite understand that. Did we have 20 burglaries or whatever they were in Kensington? And the second question is that we have 7 people working, 7 officers working now. Are there 2 or 3 on leave or disability or something like that? Would that mean that if we have 9 officers now, we would have to have 11?
I'll take the second question first. No, we have 7 active officers. 4 officers active right now, working patrol, 1 sergeant, 1 detective, and 1 chief of police. We have authorization for 10 officers, but we had been operating on 9, leaving 1 position blank. We're currently right now operating with 7.
Is that because 2 people are not on duty? I mean, are not working at this time for whatever reason?
No, we have 1 person that's not working. We had been operating with 9. We had lost 1 person that we did not replace. So we had two empty slots for a while. Then we went down to 7. We had 8 people, but one of the persons is not active working. No, I don't expect one person to return, so the 2 people that I'm referring to would put us back to 9.
And then your question was about,
We have, we have 8 on the payroll right now.
oh, I was just going to say, then the portion of your question was 20 crimes, 4 cities?
Yeah, that was the first part.
Yes.
Okay, Kensington suffered, as I understand, 3 crimes, approximately 15 in El Cerrito, approximately 1 in Richmond, and there's another city, Benicia, that we're looking at that we're looking to have more.
So I'm confused about what that means. How do the crimes that occur in the other jurisdictions affect our need for manpower?
Well, it works, when you have all this, a crime scene, and you can identify stolen property, you have to, you gather that property. How this spread out was a simple notice to all the contiguous cities, Richmond, Berkeley, Albany, El Cerrito. Hey, we're on this activity right now. Do you have anything similar? And as their responses came back, and we started sharing information, they had a lot of this type of activity. They also had some information that helped us to identify suspects. And so the kind of collaboration between the agencies is leading to a successful conclusion.
Similar crimes going on, and the similar crimes are being probably committed by some of the same people in the different jurisdictions, and the sharing of the information, which takes time, and people going out relating to the officers in other jurisdictions, means that we actually have to participate in the activity that goes on in these contiguous jurisdictions. All of them together, because they form one unit.
Yes, with respect to the victims, because as the lead agency, we have all the property. So we'll have to call the victims from these other cities to come to Kensington to get their property.
One agency must take the lead, must be the storehouse and the collector of the information. And so we want to thank, the board wants to thank the KPD for their commitment. Specifically, I understand Sergeant Barrow and Detective Martinez, who did such good work. So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, are you clear?
The short answer to your question, Leonard, is yes.
Yes. Yeah. It takes time.
I would also like to extend the gratitude to all the other officers in the department. Everyone had a role to play.
I have a question for Chief Hull about, you mentioned that on the morning shift or the patrol shift, especially in the morning and the daytime, there are certain places that they are mandated to be. Is that mandated by you and your instruction as to where you want them, or what did you mean by they're mandated?
Some of it was contractual, and some of it was mandated by me at certain places and certain areas of town where I physically asked them to be.
When you say contractual, what do you mean?
Contractual with the
school, for
school,
example.
yes.
Yeah.
The contract with the school.
We had a contract with the West Contra Costa Unified School District for patrolling and police coverage, and so.
Can I take 1 minute to kind of go off base, just 1 minute?
Of course.
Okay, I don't know if everyone heard or not, but this past Sunday, Albany Police Department suffered a power outage. And as a result of that, the phone lines were affected. I just want to make sure if anyone's heard this, I want to put some clarification out to that now. What happens in Albany if they lose power? their phones automatically roll into the Berkeley Police Department Dispatch Center. The 911 system successfully rolled over. So if you were in Kensington, you called 911, you would get a dispatcher. The non-emergency phone lines did not roll over. The reason why is because I'm in the process of trying to get 2 dedicated lines. So the line that when you dial the non-emergency number, it rolls into a non-emergency number, Albany non-emergency number. Once I get the 2 dedicated lines in, when you dial our non-emergency number, it will go to those dedicated lines, and it will at that point have the capability to be rolled over into the Berkeley Police Department. So if there's been any conversation about last Sunday and any phone issues with the Albany Police Dispatch, that's the reason why.
All right, thank you. I think I'm going to, go ahead. Do you have a quick question?
Very happy to hear that there has been some. I'm very happy to hear that there has been some resolution to the theft and burglary, or some progress, shall I say. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm very happy to know that there is something. My question really has to do with the interest in hiring 2 more officers. And my understanding has always been that when there is a special circumstance, that officers from the neighboring jurisdictions will come and help us. And this certainly was a special circumstance. It's not an ongoing thing, through 364 days of the year. So I question whether or not we really need 2 new officers that would then be on payroll for us, or do we simply accept the fact that there was a need maybe for overtime and a recognition of a job very well done, and that we try to keep the status where it is now because it has been working?
I'm sorry, it's 10:30. I believe that Chief Hull's recommendation, I don't want to speak for you, is simply concerning matters of traffic. I think he can address this matter personally. Would that be all right? It's just a recommendation. We're not taking any action. Nothing is under consideration this evening. So I'm going to make a motion that we conclude the meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we look forward to seeing you at our special meeting on November 29th, and if you're not available, December 14th.